So to get set up for our watercolor, we're going to grab a clean palette, which you might need to scrub and clean a little bit before you use this. We have straight palettes like this. We also have circular ones. The colors that we're using: medium yellow, yellow ochre, sap green, viridian hue vert, ultramarine, phthalo blue, burnt umber, and crimson. So when you grab these, first of all, each person gets your own tray, okay? And you'll grab one of these and you wanna like mix it up first, because they've been sitting for a while and they're probably separated, and it just makes it easier if it's already like squished and all mixed up together. This one, I didn't do enough, and you can see some of the, it looks like oil, but it's not, it's watercolor, but it was like a bit of a darker color. Now, when you unscrew this, it should be pretty clean. If not, just grab a wet paper towel and clean up the outside, and then clean up the inside as well. We wanna keep these as clean as we can. And when you squeeze, you wanna squeeze from the end here, not in the middle, and just get a little bit like that. Little small bit of paint. In the bottom left-hand corner. This tray has these parts that are angled. It's deeper down here and more shallow here. We want our watercolor to stay in the shallow area, not the deep area. So if you grabbed one of the ones that has circles like this around the outside, what you would do is I'll go ahead and just put this one here. You'd put it right along the edge, like that, okay? So you can see it's just along the edge. So again, just get a small amount of each. And this watercolor we're collecting today, we're gonna be using some of it, but this watercolor will dry, semi-dry, and we'll be able to use it next class period, and the one after that, and the one after that. All right, once that is done, the next step is to do a really light value that's gonna go across the top. So the brush that I'm using is my small flat brush here, and I grabbed some of that bright green. So when you grab the paint, you just take your brush right along the side just to get a little bit of it and bring it down. So I'm watering that down here. Then you take some of this, because I'm gonna mix it with another color. And that's what these small things are for, is to mix to get some new colors. So I'm gonna take some of this green. So along the edge, I just grab some, pull it down, mix it with water down here. And then this part down here is what I can then use to mix in other colors. So this is called prepping, when you prep the watercolor first. You just bring down a little bit, get it wet, and now I'm gonna take some of that green, mix it together with this. This brush that I'm using doesn't hold a ton of water, and it's pretty stiff, which is a great one to mix and to prep our watercolor. To paint, I'm going to grab a round brush. These round brushes hold quite a bit. I've got a small round or a large round. For today, I'm going to use the large round because it's going to go a little bit faster. And notice that that brush soaked up it's like everything, it gets gone so fast. So I'm just gonna put some of this light value in. And if I need to mix more, I've got my brush here, which I do need to mix more. And I'm gonna take some just green by itself with my small round brush and just go along the edges a little bit. And so it'll be a little bit more intense green of that light green, just in a few places along the edge. All right, so our first step was to sketch with pencil, then go over it with ink. Then we went in and made a light green by mixing these two greens together and went across the top. We took a little bit of the red and unsaturated the green to get some of this value down here, watered it down quite a bit, and now we're ready to do some of our middle tones. So I'm gonna start by rehydrating. All of our stuff is dry now, and I'm gonna go to our blue here. And I'm just gonna get that wet. Okay, I'm also gonna get the green wet. And I'm just gonna let that sit for a little bit on the top, and then I'll be able to pull it down later. So those are the three ones that I've rehydrated. I'm also going to get this one wet as well. And right now I'm just putting water along the top of it. I think I'm gonna use the brown. We'll use the brown today as well. So just a little bit of water on top, let that sit, and then we'll be able to pull some water or pull some color down from that. It takes about 30 seconds or so. The longer that it stays on there, the more it'll kind of seep in. So I'm using my round brush and I'm just kind of going along the edge of this. Not straight into the middle, but just along the edge. Now my brush is going to be filled with this really good paint. So I'm going to want to get all of it off. The end of the wash brush can be a really good tool for that because it's kind of pointy. So I just want to scrape out as much of this water color as I can. And then once that's done, move on to the next. So right now we're just going to get our paints rehydrated. Go ahead and do that. So we're ready to do the darks. I have my paint prepped and ready to go. So I'm gonna unsaturate a turquoise. So I'm gonna start by taking some blue. All right, I'm gonna move that here. I'm gonna take some brown, mix that in there as well, and some green. With watercolor, every brush stroke that you put here is gonna stay visible. Shows evidence of that. So you don't wanna do like a huge, big, flat line because it'll stay there. So every line should have purpose, should have energy. I'm gonna do a little bit of wet on wet technique here. So that first value that I made is still wet on my paper. I grabbed some new stuff and I'm gonna have it blend with what was there. Now, if it's dried already, just grab some water with your flat round brush and kind of touch the edges of what you applied. Watercolor dries pretty quickly, so you can do more layers on top to get it darker and darker. With watercolor, it's not gonna look like the end, like how it's gonna be at the end until you're at the end. So I've got some crispy edges right there along the side. If I want to soften those, just take some water, put it along the edge. It'll soften it a little bit. Watercolor moves around on the paper when the paper is wet. So that's kind of a fun thing to let happen kind of naturally too. So for the brown, I'm gonna mix blue and brown together. Yeah, so not brown straight. That brown is gonna be too vivid if you use it just by itself. Everything I'm doing with applying the paint is happening with my round brush. There's a lot you can do with just the round brush. So I'm continuing to overlap in places where I know that I want it to be dark. Just a little bit at a time though. So I'm gonna take my two greens, mix those together. That's what we did for our greens last time. And it's gonna look darker this time because it's gonna be overlaid on top. I'm gonna add a little bit of some golden green for my highlights. I'm taking some of this golden, mixing it with some of the green here. Making sure it's pretty watered down because I wanna give that kind of golden hint to my highlights. Gradually built up the depth, got some of that golden in and the bright. Painted plenty outside the lines. Added some thin crispy lines with the paintbrush down here. In fact, I think I'm gonna add just a few more of those. And everything kind of all blends, it all like looks like it belongs together because all the colors have been mixed at some point with each other. If you haven't attempted to do some tiny lines with your round brush, give those a try. There's some final touch-ups that I'm gonna do to this in ink after it gets dry to add some kind of like playful texture in the shadows down in here to replicate what we see in the picture. But in each bush, I've got a dark middle highlight.